Playing through Marvel's Spider-Man for the first time felt like a dream come true. Growing up, there were only two things that I cared about: Spider-Man and video games. I loved the webhead from a young age. I watched all of his movies, was obsessed with his cartoons, and even read some of his comics. Basically, Spider-Man was my hero, and I'm still invested in Peter Parker and his struggles to this very day. But if my love for Spider-Man was trumped by one thing, then that would be video games. Mainly, those made by Insomniac games. These guys ruled over my childhood, and would go on to define what I look for in games. The Ratchet and Clank series specifically are among some of my favorites of all time. So hearing that one of my favorite fictional characters was being tackled by one of my favorite developers felt like a match made in heaven. I waited eagerly for this game to come out, scouring every news source and interview I could just to get a glimpse at what Insomniac was cooking. So when the time came and the game was finally in my hands, it's safe to say that I was excited. And to no one's surprise at all, I really liked it. I would even go as far as to say that it was my game of the year for 2018. Though, for as much as I enjoyed my time with the game, I never felt compelled to go back to it after that initial playthrough. I've always felt as though there was something off about the game, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it at the time. However, I definitely wasn't the only one to notice this, since while the game did receive an overwhelmingly positive reception both critically and financially, it wasn't without any catches. A trend that I noticed while looking at old reviews for this game is that while the coverage was generally positive, nearly every single one of them mentioned that this title lacked originality. It was almost impossible to talk about this game without comparing it to the Batman Arkham series. I get that it's a tired comparison to make, but there's a lot to be said about how much influence the Batman Arkham series had on the entire action-adventure genre. It's easy to compare Spider-Man PS4 to the Batman games and see what exactly inspired certain elements. Not many people took issues with the inspiration, but the Arkham series influence was something that was brought up in nearly every single review of the game. Back in the day, I thought these people were just blowing smoke, so I paid no attention to what they meant by this. However, with the release of Spider-Man 2 being just around the corner, my interest in these games were reignited. But it was upon doing a brand new playthrough of these games when I started to see where the critics were coming from, and once that clicked, everything began to make more sense to me. It's inarguable that Insomniac's Spider-Man is a well put together game that's sure to offer some enjoyment, but to me, this game plays it way too safe, to the point where I feel as though it'll leave a negative impact on how we perceive it in the future. So for today, let's talk about the concerning legacy of Spider-Man PS4. I think the first thing I want to do is clarify that no matter what I end up saying in this video, I still like this game and think it's worth playing. Because of this, the first thing I want to do is highlight the stuff that I think this game does really well. The combat of Marvel's Spider-Man feels very fluid. Attacks all link into each other nicely, and you can easily weave in and out your different gadgets into your combos. This is integral because keeping a high combo count is how you quickly fill up the special meter. You can then spend this energy to either instantly knock out an enemy or use it to recover some health in the middle of a fight. Skilled players that are able to avoid damage can take full advantage of their focus meter, instantly taking out multiple thugs at the snap of a finger. But at the same time, it might not be the best idea to expend all of it at once, since if you find yourself on the back foot, you can give yourself a quick pick-me-up. This is a solid mechanic. Regardless of whether you decide to go on the aggressive or to play it safe, the focus meter encourages the player to constantly be interacting with the enemies while giving you an added incentive to master those dodges. Something else that I like about the combat of this game is that it taps into the more tech-savvy side of Spider-Man. Peter Parker is a smart guy, so it stands to reason that he would put some of that knowledge to good use in his superhero affairs. We get some of the standard Spider-Man equipment that you would expect. Impact webbing, trip mines, and web grenades are all here and accounted for, and are fun to use. But it's the other gadgets on offer that feel a bit more hit or miss, both in terms of utility and how well they fit the character. Stuff like the suspension matrix, concussion blast, and autonomous spider drones feel very situational, and go beyond the realm of reasoning with this interpretation of the character. It also doesn't help that they aren't exactly the most fun to use, since they act more as instant win buttons rather than being a trick to use in a pinch. Of course I could always not use them, but at that point, they may as well not even be included. I typically only rely on the web-based gadgets, since I feel as though they fit the character more and are just more balanced tools to use as a whole. Using all of the gadgets Spider-Man has at his disposal in this game just highlights how easily exploitable they can be. I played this game on the hardest difficulty setting and rarely struggled in any of the combat encounters. Sure, part of that has to do with my sick skills as an action gamer, but I think that most of it can be attributed to poor balancing. Yeah, the combat of this game isn't flawless, but it's probably my favorite part of Spider-Man PS4 from a gameplay perspective. It's solidly constructed and offers some room for experimentation. The only critical feature missing here is a taunt mechanic. I don't want to go too deep into my action game spiel today, so all I'll say is that a button to make fun of enemies on command could spice up the combat. You know, I'm imagining a system here where you can flex on your enemies with some cheeky animations. Maybe if you successfully perform a taunt, you could instantly gain 1 bar of focus. It's some classic risk versus reward stuff, and I think it would go a long way in helping us feel more like Spider-Man, because it sure as shit won't be the content surrounding the combat that'll make that happen. Outside of the combat, Spider-Man PS4 takes a very safe approach to its content. The best comparison I have is to modern-day Ubisoft. This game has all the trappings you would expect. Hack the radio towers to reveal more of the map, collectibles that provide quick dopamine rushes rather than being meaningful pieces of content in their own right, enemy faction bases that you can either stealth or go in loud to clear out. Nearly everything you do in this game has been done before by other titles. The only difference is that this time, you can do whatever a spider can. A lot of people really got into this game and enjoyed what was on offer, and I did too when I first played it. I remember listening to a lot of YouTube videos while marking off the checklist, and in that sense, this game filled its purpose rather well. But it's in retrospect when I realized that this game doesn't exactly offer anything that I can't find anywhere else. Again, Spider-Man PS4 is a well-constructed game, but it's one that I think suffers from a lack of identity. This is especially noticeable when compared to some of the past titles featuring this character. Back in the 2000s, when licensed games were all the craze, Spider-Man was the frontrunner of this trend. Because of how much of the webhead we were getting, extra measures were taken to make each of these games stand out from each other. What this resulted in was a slew of creative and fresh takes on the character. Of course, we got games based on movies, but we also received some of the most unique and creative games you could find in the superhero genre at the time. A Spider-Man game with the presentation of a graphic novel, where you play as both our main hero and one of his most iconic villains. A game where you take control of 4 different Spider-Men, each one of them having a different playstyle and unique visual flair. A Spider-Man game which sees Peter reclaiming the black suit as symbiotes invade the city, with gameplay that allows you to switch between 2 different combat styles. You can even do this on the fly while also weaving it in fluently with your movement, as you take on venomized versions of his villains and allies, and wait a minute, this game actually sounds like a whole lot of fun. Yes, it's Spider-Man Web of Shadows that comes to mind whenever I think of unique games featuring this character. One of the most standout parts about this game to me is just how well the combat was integrated into the movement system. You can take out enemies while web swinging, throw them up in the air and do some sick combos, battle enemies on the side of buildings, and so on. The combat system offers so much freedom with the inclusion of on-the-fly suit swapping. While in the red suit, Spider-Man has access to blisteringly fast and powerful blows, but when donning his alien threads, his inner rage takes over, switching to a more brutal area of effect-focused moveset. While its try-hard-to-be-edgy attitude does date the game a little bit, I find myself more invested in what Web of Shadows brings to the table compared to Insomniac's offerings. However, I will say that when all is said and done, that Spider-Man PS4 is still the better game overall, and that applies to a lot of the titles that I mentioned. For how unique and varied these Spider-Man games are, a lot of them end up falling into the same trappings. Most of these games have filler content sprinkled in to pad out the runtime. Remember city events? Remember hero points? A lot of the blame can be shifted to Activision's money-hungry bullshit, where they crunch their developers and give them literally no budget to make these games. What this results in are games that lack a whole lot of polish, and when taking that into account, it's easy to see where the mixed critical reception comes from. But let's not kid ourselves and pretend that Insomniac's game blows the competition out of the water, because there are still some aspects of these older games that were done so much better, mainly the web swinging. In the older games, you could just zoom across the map at a blinding speed with enough skill, and there were even some slick maneuvers you could pull off with enough finesse. The Insomniac games are just way too on rails for my liking. A lot of the thrill that comes with web swinging is sucked out when you realize just how automated it is. I may as well not even be playing the game if it's just going to autocorrect failures for me. Say what you want about these old games, but at least they trusted the player enough to actually play them. I think it's worth reiterating that I think Insomniac's first outing with the Spider-Man character is pretty good for the most part. It's clear that the minds behind this title have passion and love for the character and its fans. They go out of their way to include all sorts of references to different pieces of Spider-Man media, and have a firm grasp on how to tell an emotional story with that material. My issue isn't that I think it's bad. My problem is that I don't think that it's anything special. The reason why I care so much about this is because I'm worried how this game is going to be remembered in another 5 to 10 years. People still talk about and remember these older Spider-Man titles from their youths, not just because they grew up with them, but because they all offered a fresh experience that you couldn't find anywhere else. In comparison, Spidey PS4 plays things a little too safely. While this did result in a quality experience, it doesn't have much else going for it beyond being that good Spider-Man game that came out on PS4. Insomniac was so obsessed with crafting the definitive Spider-Man experience that there wasn't much room left to add some of that secret sauce. You know, some of that edge that makes you go, oh yeah, this is Insomniac Spider-Man. No one else could have done this but them. Which is a shame, because Insomniac was always about pushing the boundaries, and making sure you knew when something came from their studio. I think part of the reason behind this safe approach might have to do with some of the games that came out before this one. The last couple of Spider-Man games we got before Insomniac's time with the character weren't exactly the most well-regarded ones. Sure, the TASM games had some interesting ideas, but they didn't have the money or the time invested in them to make those games truly shine. I wouldn't be surprised if those years of mediocrity contributed to the general audience losing their faith in the Spider-Man brand. So once Sony got their mitts on the game license, I wouldn't be surprised if they put some mandates in place to try to appeal to the masses. It's probably why Insomniac took a very safe approach during development. They know better than anyone what kind of game sells, and when this game started development, there was nothing more popular than the Ubisoft formula. I take it that the idea here was to hook in a new crowd with a somewhat safe time, and then slowly introduce new ideas for potential follow-ups. It's just that what they ended up going with was a little too formulaic for my liking. But I don't think that this is a hopeless scenario. Sure, the first game might have been a little on the generic side, but I chalk it up to the team getting used to the position. Because you know what they say, once you've exhausted the old guard, then it's time to turn to the new blood for some fresh ideas. "2020's Spider-Man Miles Morales filled me with a lot of hope. While it's true that this game does suffer from a lot of the same issues that plagued the original game, on the whole, I feel as though this Spider-Man game has a much more clear identity and purpose. Most of this is by nature of not focusing on Peter Parker. Rather, the spotlight is shined on the up-and-coming Spider-Man. Since Miles is a relatively new character, all things considered, there haven't been any games that focus entirely on him yet. Because of this, it was left up to Insomniac to carve out a style and flair completely separate from Peter. This ranges from major gameplay mechanics all the way down to how this Spider-Man presents himself. The gadgets have been heavily toned back, and in its place are a myriad of electric-based powers to play around with. Not only can these abilities be used in combat to give yourself the extra edge, but they can also be applied during traversal. You can give yourself some emergency height, or rocket down the streets with your Venom powers. One of my favorite additions to the game has to be the revamped trick system. Since Miles is so new to having his spider powers, he's still in that honeymoon phase. He'll pull out his phone during free falls, and perform daring acrobatics before saving himself just mere inches from the pavement. This creates a much more energetic and excited Spider-Man than we're used to seeing in these games. Regardless of whether or not you like him more than Peter, you can't deny that having Miles here goes a long way in setting Insomniac's games apart from any of the other ones. Sure, the experience isn't perfect, and I can see why some people would prefer the 2018 game, but to me, this is a step in the right direction. It's creativity like this that sets Insomniac games apart from most Western devs. They like to give their games character, and Miles is the perfect hero to flex those muscles on. From the little we've seen of Spider-Man 2 so far, it's shaping up to be a pretty interesting follow-up. I can already tell that it's a product that I'll at the very least enjoy. I'm especially interested in seeing what direction they're going to go in with their take on the black suit. It'll be refreshing to get a version of this story that has two Spider-Men involved in it. While I have little doubts that this is going to mostly be a Peter Parker affair, just having Miles around is going to make this story much more unique than most other adaptations by default. However, what I'm looking forward to the most is seeing how they're going to expand the core gameplay off of the foundation set in the Miles standalone title. I don't want to get too much into speculation since this game is only a month away, but just the fact that my eyes are once again getting glued to this project speaks volumes of the quality of these games. However, only time will tell if Insomniac will be able to stick the landing. I can tell these guys are so close to carving their own name in this long legacy. All they need is just a little more time, and then one day, I'm sure we'll get that ultimate Spider-Man experience. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. You all know the drill here. I'd like to give a special shout out to all of my channel supporters for making these videos possible. They're all lovely people and I owe them the world for giving me the opportunity to do what I do now. If you're interested in joining the ranks, then feel free to check out my Patreon or become a YouTube member. I know I don't offer a whole lot beyond just giving out early video access, but it's at the very least something I can do for the support. Now, I know that this was a bit of a weird one for me. Like, I pretty much never talk about Western games on this channel. I'm mostly known for stuff like Persona and Devil May Cry and other weeb trash, but a 3D action adventure game? Yeah, I'd never. But seriously, I've actually been wanting to talk about this game for a while since Insomniac games basically defined my childhood, and I'm really looking forward to Spider-Man 2. Believe it or not, I do actually play more than just Japanese games. But don't worry, I won't make this a habit. I'm still sticking to my roots. Speaking of which, the next major video is either going to be on Persona 5 Tactica or Final Fantasy X. I'm currently writing the script for the FF10 video, but when Tactica comes out, that's going to take priority. So I have no idea when either of those videos are going to come out, so we'll just have to wait and see. If you want to stay up to date with that and other upcoming videos, then feel free to follow my Twitter or join my Discord server. Both will be linked in the description. Once again, I'd like to thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you all next time.